Hey everyone, this week we're going to be working with a project called Metal Repousse. And this is kind of a fun little project. You should find in your folder a little piece of foil and it has a piece of paper taped to it. So in addition to that, you'll need a ballpoint pen, a pencil, that little wooden stylus, an eraser, and some magic markers for the very end. So the first thing you want to do, go ahead and get that metal piece of foil. You'll notice it's a little bit thicker than like your standard aluminum foil, and this is going to allow us to get the right effect. And essentially what we're going to be doing is working with texture this week in order to kind of create an impression on this foil with our drawing. So the first thing you might want to do is just really carefully detach that piece of paper from the foil, and we'll get into just drawing our motif as usual. So there's my drawing. You can see it's using my owl motif. It's a pretty simple composition, just based out of those, basic shapes that I've been using all semester. But now what I want to do is start kind of filling that negative space that's left with different types of lines. So you can see here on the wings, I'm using these really short dashed lines. That's going to create a really great effect. Once we start tracing this into the metal foil, it's going to leave an impression. Every little line we can do will create a little bit of texture and interest to your piece. So what I did from here on out was just sort of fill in most of the rest of the space with different types of lines that I thought would give a little bit of variation in texture. So there you go. I filled in all that negative space. You can see it's kind of an interesting, visually interesting sort of piece. And what I want to do now is I want to reattach it to that foil. You know what you could have done probably instead is just kind of flip that foil over and just use the piece of paper, but I wanted to make sure I was keeping everything nice and clean. So all I want to do now is just go ahead and grab a couple extra pieces of Scotch tape and go ahead and reattach this on top of the foil. At this point, I kind of had an idea for my drawing. I thought it would look good to add a little border around the space. So that's what I did. I just kind of lightly took my pencil. I made sure I wasn't leaving too much of an impression on the foil underneath at this point. But this was just kind of a last-minute decision that I thought would help my piece. So for this next part, you're just going to need a basic ballpoint pen, something that isn't too sharp, but that when you push into it and you start to trace your lines, it's going to leave an impression underneath. I also decided at the bottom I would add in another piece of tape there, just because this is going to be sort of like tracing. I didn't want my drawing shifting around on top too much. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you put like a pad of paper or something underneath. Something like a folded over newspaper works great, because what this is going to do is it's going to provide a little bit of cushion when you start tracing over your drawing with a ballpoint pen. It's going to leave the lines impressed into the foil beneath. So this is that repousse process, right? Which actually is the French word for like to raise up. And so what we're going to essentially get is a nice kind of relief sort of look in our foil underneath. And here you might be able to see it has just kind of left that impression of the border in the foil, and so I'm just going to go back over and with my ballpoint pen trace over every line, every big line and little line that I created in my drawing, and that's going to put the impression on the foil. Once I was finished with tracing all those lines in pen, I even could just kind of flip it over to the back and you'll be able to see the impression. It looks really great already, but there are a few changes that I think I'm going to do. So what I need to do is just separate that paper that we traced over from the foil, and I can get to work kind of just refining this and giving it a few final touches. So the next thing you want to do is grab that little wood stylus that we've used for so many different things throughout the semester, put your foil back on that paper, and you can start tracing over areas that you think need to be deepened up a little bit. For me, I traced over some of the lines. I was able to thicken them up, I think, around the tree trunk, around the wings and the contour of the owl's body. And what you also might do is use the back edge to sink things down. So for example, the center of the owl's eyes, I made these little kind of swirly motions very, very gently to push those down a little bit further. So essentially what this is doing is stretching that foil very minutely. You don't want to go too hard with it. It will definitely, like, you could punch a hole through your foil if you're really overworking it. So be delicate here, but just use that stylus to kind of create deeper impressions, to pop things inward or outward. And you can also do things like flip it over to the backside to do the opposite, which you'll see I do here. The last thing you can do to make your piece a little more interesting is to add a little bit of color. So the magic markers in your kit should work for this. If you have permanent Sharpie markers, they will actually work a little bit better. You can see that, our magic markers are washable, so they definitely resist the foil a little bit, and it will give it a really light kind of color. On the other hand, if you're using permanent markers, you'll find that sometimes they go a little too dark and it takes away some of the effect of those textures or those lines that you put in, and you can always wipe it away with a piece of paper towel or something like that. But here I'm just kind of using those magic markers to color in various parts of my owl and the background. And at this point, I kind of thought that blue-green background color went on a little dark, so I grabbed a wet paper towel and a dry paper towel, and I could just kind of wipe parts of that away. What I found was a lot of the color still kind of retained in those inset kind of grooves that I put in the texture, and they kind of just wiped off the surface. So there was still a hint of that color there, and I kind of used my dry paper towel then to go over and burnish sort of the parts of the that I might have missed. Also a little bit on the owl's body, just to make the colors a little less intense. And there it is. There's my final product. You can see it catches light really cool. It's got a little hint of color, which makes it pop a little bit. But really, the star of the show here is the texture, right? It gives that really fantastic effect. You can see that you could do this probably with students who are even at a really pretty young age. It's such an easy, instant results sort of art project. So I hope you enjoyed this one. If you have questions about it, feel free to reach out. But in the meantime, I hope that you have a great time making your own metal repousse.